students. This video is part of the October 23rd remote class. In it, we are continuing to explore various analytic tools that let us combine, repair, modify, and summarize different geometries. It's really our first sort of foray and dipping our toe into the analytics and spatial analytics. The tools I'm going to talk about in this video are among my favorite and some of the most useful in ArcGIS. Their stated and basic purpose is to condense data. So it's typically when you have a lot of different feature parts, right? You know, in the case I'll show you in a little bit with roads and also with the redlining zones as well. You know, the way that these data elements are structured now is that each individual zone, right, each unique part of the city that had a different redlining designation is treated individually. And that's great. Sometimes that's what you need. Sometimes, you know, the point up here that is hazardous needs to be separate from the point over here. You need to look at them sort of separately to fully understand and visualize. But maybe you could simplify this. Maybe you don't need that. Maybe all you need to know is that something is hazardous or declining, you know, or desirable, or, you know, any other of the gross conditions that were put on people's lives, you know, back in the 30s and 40s when these were created. You know, maybe the way you want to organize a piece of data like this is just with 4 rows. You know, one row that is all of the areas deemed hazardous regardless of where they are. Maybe you want to take these giant layer of roads, you know, where quite literally each segment of a road, each street segment is treated as its own piece of information, which may be helpful, you know, in a few weeks when we start wayfinding and navigating. But maybe you want to make this simpler. Maybe you want to make one shapefile for each street name, right? Each road's street name, regardless of sort of how long it is, you want them unique. Or maybe you just want this to be one giant line. That giant line just sort of shows the grids of Philadelphia. To do all of these, you use a tool that's in data management, generalization, dissolve. And what dissolve lets you do is take a lot of data and smush it down based on some common shared attribute. You know, as I'll show in a sec, you also can use it to double itself as a summary tool, right? So if there happens to be a field value, for example, that you want to calculate in that condensation, you can. And so let's actually do that with acres. You know, you'll notice that in the data there is something called acres. You could go to calculate geometry. You know, acres, I want you to be an area. The area unit I want is acres. And it'll calculate it. And, you know, there's no purpose that we're doing this for, you know, any output or next step. This is really just so, you know, we have it so that we can quickly do a summary when we run dissolve. So what I have now is I've got 40 or so sections of the city, you know, individual sections that were drawn. The person loaded the redlining condition into them, and I know their acreage. And so I can use dissolve, right? If I come here to, you know, tools, generalization, dissolve, to actually change the form of this. So it won't be 40 records anymore, it'll be 4. That's what dissolve can do. So I'll grab in the redlining zones, and I'll give it the name, you know, red line dissolve, and I'll save it. And it wants 2 things. The dissolve field is, I like to call it the smush field, right? The field of commonality. The field that has a value that is shared amongst multiple records such that the data will condense itself into those values. So condition here, there are multiple different sub-areas in Philadelphia that were deemed hazardous, and I want them to just push themselves into a single area. I want to select any part of the city that was called hazardous and see all of the city that was called hazardous sort of show up. I want to know its total acreage. I want it sort of as one row in a table. That's the dissolve field. So we'd be saying condition, right? We want to dissolve by condition. So take the 4 conditions that are spread across 40 rows and create 4 rows, 4 records, 4 parts of my feature class. The other thing you can do that's optional is calculate statistics. If you have something in a statistical field, for example, and you want to be able to visualize or sort of quickly analyze, the total acreage that is hazardous or declining or still desirable, you could summarize it, right? You could come in here and say, oh, in that acres field, when you're condensing by the condition field, sum it, right? Or give me the minimum for each or the mean for each or whatever it have you. So I will run it. It'll do its thing, blue, 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 blue. The result that's going to come back doesn't materially look very different, than what was created, but it is in fact quite different when I open it and I see we now have 4, right? And when I click on best, all of the best show up, right? They come together, they process together, they analyze together. All of the declining sort of show up. And it summarized the total number of acreage in each. So that is dissolve, right? It's how you move from a larger set of data and smush it down based on a shared value with the option to run some analytics. Let's do it on the road dissolve as well, right? This is a much bigger file, right? The roads has, roughly 41,000. Oops, caught me there. You're getting some funny little baby crying, Shay sneezing in these videos. 41,000. And maybe I want to break these down. Maybe a good one to break it down by here is the street name, right? So I'll just break it down by whatever the street name is here. That's still probably going to lead to some things where maybe it's 55th Ave or whatever. But, that's the cool thing is you can even down or dissolve by 2 different fields. Let's see. Is there any sort of thing I would want to summarize? I guess I could do length, see how long something is. Yeah, but we'll just keep it simple for this. So I'm going to take these sort of 41,000 or so fields. I'll load that into roads to dissolve. I'll call you road dissolve. Condition's not a field anymore, so I'll take street name as my field again. And then I'll say street type. And so at least by doing those 2, that will mean if there ever is an instance where there's like a Cedar Street and a Cedar Ave, it won't make them the same. It'll realize that like, oh, I need to have a combination of Cedar and Ave or 57th and Street. And just what the hell, for the heck of it, I'll take that shape length and I'll summarize it up. And so running that, it'll take certainly a little bit longer because it is a bigger file here. So bear with me. We'll have, a minute or perhaps so of awkward silence because your professor is too lazy to edit videos. But there it goes. Right, again, materially it doesn't look any different, but the difference is where this was 41,000 records. Each segment of the street where it intersected another was its own feature part. Roads dissolve is now 3,000, right? And the records are now changed by the name. So when I grab 10th Street, I'll see 10th Street, right? 10th Street from the start all the way to the end. I'll see 13th Street. 13th Street from up and all the way to the end. What are some practical uses of this? Well, it simplifies the data. In the last video, we learned how you can use intersect to cross lines, and it'll show you all the vertices where they cross. Well, if you don't have a simplified data set, if you tried to do that to this giant layer of roads, it would literally create points of intersection where like one block of 13th intersected the other block of 13th, because it looks at it and sees, oh, you're 2 different component parts. Whereas this says, no, every piece of 13th Street, pretend you're the same shape record. So it's not going to show you where like 13th and Market intersects, 13th and JFK, right? Would that work? Yes. 13th and, no, it's not JFK there. 13th and Arch, right? It's not going to show you that. It will show you where 13th intersects Market, or where 13th intersects Arch, or where 13th intersects Walnut, but it doesn't show you the intersections that would be occurring as an artifact of the data, right? Intersections that are only occurring because the streets are broken up into multiple parts. So that's dissolve, right? A great way to take a lot of data and smush it down into something more manageable with the option to summarize things as well.